Whoa. Hello, people. Welcome back to the night in my backyard vlog. How are you guys doing? I just uploaded a Nightwalk vlog like a couple hours ago. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I recorded that like some weeks ago. I was talking about how it was still spring and shit. But this is actually me now in July, right after 4th of July. So I remember, right, I was on, what was it? The episode 19 of the podcast. And there was a comment that I responded to, and it was someone who responded to my Nightwalk vlog where I talked about why I wouldn't pay for sex. And it was a good friend of the channel, Anton1. And he mentioned, because, in the video I was talking about how I wouldn't pay for sex. And he mentioned how in dating and relationships, you end up paying in one way or another anyway, right? And that's a very good point. So it's like, even if you say, well, I'm not going to go to a prostitute, I'm not going to go to a hooker, I'm not going to go to a sex worker, I'll just get a girlfriend, I'll just get a wife. You're more than likely you're going to end up paying in one way or another anyway. But I've already thought long and hard about that. You think I don't know this shit? Look at me, I'm crazy. Nah. But, it's funny. I was just, on episode 20 of the podcast, I was talking about The Manipulated Man, the book. And it's interesting because the author of that book, she talks about that as well. She talks about how prostitution and marriage are very similar. At the end of the day, it's all about trying to get resources out of men in exchange for sex. And I even talked about that on that very same Nightwalk vlog episode, right? How prostitution is just a compressed version of the marriage divorce scheme. It's the same shit, just without all the extra nonsense. But if you're talking about straight up dating and relationships, right? Like, oh, I want a girlfriend. How do you avoid becoming a boyfriend trick, right? How do you avoid becoming the beta provider? And so I think what it comes down to is your mentality. It's all about your mentality, right? So nowadays, what do people always say? People always say, what do you bring to the table? What does the girl bring to the table? What does the guy bring to the table? And that's a good place to start right there, right? So the way most men think, right? The way most men think is like this. Okay, I'm sliding up to the table. We got bread, we got shrimp. No, I'm playing. But for real. All right, so she at the table, I'm at the table, right? Now, this is how most guys think, right? So obviously you want sex from her, right? But if you're getting sex from her, that means she's getting sex from you, right? Yeah, I mean, you can't have it one way. It's a two-way street there, right? So sex, right? But they also add, typically, right? Provider, protector, money, just whatever little bullshit she want, right? As far as like any sort of attention, whatever, right? All kind of shit. And so that's how most guys think. It's like, to them, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm getting sex. She's getting sex. She's getting male companionship. I'm getting female companionship, but I still need to add up all this shit to compensate. And so if you want to avoid being a beta trick boyfriend type dude, you got to look at it like this. She's at the table. You're at the table. She's bringing sex. You're bringing sex. Equal. Done deal. It's right then and there. It's equal. If that has to be your mentality, if you want to avoid being a boyfriend provider, a trick, whatever the fuck, a boyfriend trick. That's my new term, boyfriend trick. It's a lot of boyfriend tricks out there. Let's be real. So if you want to avoid that, then that has to be your mentality. You have to undo this programming of thinking like, well, she's as long as she brings sex, I have to bring all this other shit. You got to cut that shit out. you got to erase that from your mind. You see, and then that's pretty much the only way you're going to avoid that is that you got to stop thinking that it's your job to compensate with all this extra shit, right? And it's all about mentality, right? And see, the thing about me is just that I don't value sex enough to do all that extra shit. That's just me. I'm not. I ain't paying for shit. What did Crunchy Black say? I ain't giving a bitch a hot dog. He said I ain't giving a bitch a hot dog, man. Now look, I ain't that. Look, I ain't that cheap, but you get the idea, right? But the thing about it though is that all that shit sound cool. It sounds cute when I say that, right? But then look at me. I'm a 29-year-old virgin and I'm still single. So obviously, when you have that mentality, it might not work out for you. Surprise, surprise, surprise. And see, that's the thing about it though. That's why so many guys end up compensating, because it's gonna be so hard to get with a girl as an average guy, right? It's gonna be so hard to get, and look, I'm talking decent looking women. You got now if you're talking about them gorilla looking bitches, then look, forget about everything I said. The rules are completely different. But we talking about like fives and up, right? Fives and up. The way shit is now, bruh, these girls, they know their worth. They know the value of what they have between their legs. And most of them, most decent looking women, bruh, they're not going to accept those terms. They're not going to sit at the table with you and say, okay, I'm bringing sex, you're bringing sex, that's equal, that's a fair deal. They're just not going to do that. And so if you do have that mentality and you're average or below average, or like you're just not attractive enough or successful enough, you look, you might want to be ready to be single for a very long time, right? But see, because I don't give a fuck about this shit. I can be single. I can be a virgin. And see, that's why I can have this mentality, because it don't matter to me. You know, I can take it or leave it. I don't give a fuck. But the reason why so many guys end up being a boyfriend provider or just a straight up trick is that, you know, they want it so bad and it's no other way for them to get it, because most girls, they're just not going to accept those terms, right? If you sit there talking about some, well, I'm not gonna provide, I'm not paying for dates, I'm not buying you gifts, I'm not doing this, you know, I'm not gonna let you move in with me. I'm not. If you sitting there saying all that shit and you're not attractive enough to back that shit up, you're gonna end up being alone. You're gonna end up being single for a very long time, and that's the price. But that's the price you have to pay. Right. So again, I say all this shit. It sound cool. It sound real cool on YouTube. But trust and believe, it's gonna be very hard for you to get laid like that. So even though I say all this shit, I understand how unrealistic it is to expect to get a girl when you're not willing to make those investments, when you're not willing to make those compromises. Because if you're not gonna do it and you're not like a Chad, you're not, well, I'm Chad Marco, but you know what I'm talking about. If you're not a Chad or a stud, if you're not attractive enough to where she feels like, okay, sex for sex is a fair deal, because we always say it, alpha fucks, beta bucks. When you're alpha enough, you don't have to compensate as much, you know. You can pretty much just pull up with dick and a grape swisher and you good. But guys like us, guys like myself, we got to do much more. You know, we have to make significant investment. We have to make compromises. We have to make sacrifices. And if you're not willing to do that, it's going to be very difficult for you to get with a decent looking girl. But if you want them gorilla looking bitches, them Magilla gorilla looking bitches, that's a totally different program right there, man. But I'm telling you, bro, it's so hard to avoid that shit. It's so hard to avoid becoming a boyfriend provider, dude. You know, I was watching the Fresh and Fit podcast You know, they're like these two guys. They talk about red pill shit, fitness and whatnot. And they had these girls on, and they were they were all talking about like who should pay for a date, right? And the girl was like, I got my own money. I got my own bag. I don't need a man to pay for no date for me. And so the guy was like, okay, well, how often do you pay for dates? And she pretty much said, pretty much never, right? And her reasoning was this: he asked me out. How can you expect me to pay for a date and you ask me out? And so then the guy was like, well, look, what does it matter if you saying all this shit about you got your own money, your own bag? You not about to pay for no date anyway. Because the fact is, you're not going to be the one asking out guys. Guys are going to be the ones asking you out. So even if you saying all this shit about I got my own money, I got my own bag, it don't matter, because at the end of the day, you're not going to approach a guy. A guy's going to approach you, and so you're going to expect him to pay for the date. But see, the whole point here, right? And I talked about this shit before, but I hate it when people say it's a man's job to approach a woman. I hate when people say that shit. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but when people say it's a man's job, I feel like it plays into the manipulation aspect of why women want us to approach them so much to begin with. And just like what they were just talking about on the Fresh and Fit podcast, bro, if you approach her first, you're expected to pay for the date, right? So just think about it. From the very beginning, you see a girl, you're attracted to her, but you got to ask her out because she's not going to ask you out. And so step like off the jump, you're paying for the date. And that's how it all begins. And see, that's why I don't like it when guys say that shit, because they're undermining the underlying manipulation and the power that it gives women when guys approach them first, because you're setting the tone that I pay for the date, I pay for shit, I invest, I provide. That's why it's so important for a man to approach a woman first. Because if you don't do that, you're not setting that tone. And I remember when I told you guys about when that cashier was chasing me around and shit, and she asked me for my number, it made me realize how women feel. It made me realize the power of being approached first. And that shit is really important. I'll never forget it. I felt no stress. I didn't feel like I needed to impress anybody. Like, I felt like it was okay just to be a bum ass nigga, right? But see, that's why it's so important for you to approach them first, because it sets the tone for you to be the fucking provider. It sets the tone for you to pay for shit, right? Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't approach women first. I'm just saying that it's more to it. When people say it's a man's job, I feel like they're oversimplified. It's so much deeper than that. But like I said, man, it's gonna be very difficult to try to get a girl and at the same time avoid being a provider. But and really, even if I somehow manage to get into that situation, right, it's probably not gonna last long, right? Because at some point most women are going to expect a significant investment from you, right? So even if you manage to get in that situation, and I really don't think it's impossible. I don't think it's impossible. I just think that it's probably not going to last long, because at some point she's going to expect you to invest more than she is, right? It might start off 50-50. It might start off with her doing just as much as you, if not more, but eventually it's going to flip, you know. And I remember when one of my friends got into a relationship, that's kind of what I saw with him and his girl. Like, at first it was like she was buying him stuff, like she was the one really kind of like doing a lot of the work. And I was like, damn, I ain't know girls did all that, right? But slowly over time, she began to flip the script, and next thing you know, he's investing far more than what she was. So even if you get into that situation, bro, I feel like it's not even gonna last long. You know, I always think back to that game Catherine by Atlas, you know, where you use the guy Vincent, and he's got two girls, Catherine, and it's a puzzle game about love and sex and all that shit, right? But I always think back to the beginning of the game, right? And Vincent, he's around like my age, right? And he's in a relationship with Catherine, and everything's been going smooth up until the point where the game begins, right? And she's starting to expect him to invest more, right? She wants to move, like she wants them to move in together and get a house. She wants to have kids and get married, and he's kind of on the fence about it. But looking at that, it kind of, I think you can see a lot of examples of that in real life, where relationships kind of start off where it's you don't have to make those big investments, but over time, she's going to expect you to do it. So I think when it comes down to it, you can avoid it, but it's going to be very difficult if you're not attractive enough to, it's going to be very difficult if you're not attractive enough to make a girl feel like it would be worth it. And it's really sad, man. It's unfortunate, but I think it really highlights how women look at guys like us, how women look at guys like us as utilities. Guys who don't have that raw, masculine, physical attractiveness that would just make them want to pull our clothes off and feel satisfaction just from who we are, and shit like that. Guys like us, we gotta pay, we gotta compensate. Right? We got to invest. We got to put ourselves in all kind of dumbass situations, right? We got to sit there and buy gifts and take them out on dates and put up with bullshit. And then the second you stop doing that, you're going to lose her. Because if you're not doing it, then she's just going to find another guy who's willing to do it. So, I thank you for that comment. It was a good point. But like I said, man, at the end of the day, I'm not paying. I'm not paying. I don't care whether you're talking about tricking or boyfriend tricking. I'm not, and see, and it kind of makes me think back to, I know that the red pill YouTuber, Coach Greg Adams, he always says that all men pay. Everyone pays, right? In one way or another, right? Time, attention, resources, all that shit, right? And I think there's some truth to that, right? I mean, at the very least, even if you're a Chad, you got to put gas in the car to pull up, right? You got to at least buy the Great Switch. But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of oversimplifying, like the whole process of the transactional nature of a relationship, right? Even if all men pay, certainly some men pay way more than the others, right? If all men gotta pay, then wouldn't you rather be the guy that's paying the least, right? I mean, it's a big difference between the Chad who's just, all he had to do was buy some clothes and put gas in the car and pull up with a condom, versus the guy who's who spent thousands on dates, gifts, had to move in with her, had to get a car in her name with her, had to pay her bills. It's a big difference, right? So if you gotta pay, right, then this, at the very least, if you want to make sure you're not in a beta provider situation, this is what you got to do. You got to keep tabs on how much you invest in, right? And that's really what it comes down to, is that if you're in that situation and you want to avoid it, because again, look, at some point you're gonna have to buy McDonald's at least, right? But what I'm saying is that if you want to avoid becoming a boyfriend provider, you have to keep a mental note of how much you're investing versus how much she's investing. And if you do the math and you figure out that you're investing way more than she is, then you're probably a boyfriend provider. You're probably a boyfriend trick, right? And God, and it's I know it's not very romantic to look at relationships that way, but again, if you are serious about avoiding that shit, you have options. And I would even go so far as to say that it's probably a great shit test for men as well. You know, to just don't stop providing. Don't be a provider and see what happens. Don't be a provider and see what happens, right? If she stays, then goddamn, you might have found a good one. But not many. Again, women nowadays, they know their worth, and not many of them, they're not going to tolerate that shit. You know, they want to be compensated for their vagina, and if you're not willing to put up, if you're not willing to make a significant investment into their vagina hole, then they're probably just not going to deal with you. And if you are hell bent on doing like me and not being a trick and or boyfriend trick, you're probably going to be single and a virgin for a very long time. But it's okay, because you have the company of me, Chad Marco, your good friend. We'll get through this, probably. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode of the Nightwalk vlog, and I will return again. I hope you guys continue to enjoy your summer. I know I am. Ja Ne.